In this very short video, I'll be sharing with you why you need to have an extra source of income as an immigrant, right? So we all know that it is getting increasingly more difficult to just go by and do everything with your salary. And this is not just an immigrant problem. It is not just a UK problem. It's not just an Australian problem. It is not just an American problem. It is a global problem. All right. More families are finding it very difficult to keep up with the cost of living, with the cost of running their family, just with salary alone. And if we look at even at history, the rate at which things like the cost of buying a house is moving up, the increase in salary has never really caught up with it. There is a wide gap between the rate at which salary is going up and also the rate at which the price of houses, take for example, is going up. And even when you look at inflation rate, the way inflation rate is moving up, it's very steady. Every 5 years that you don't have an increase in your a substantial increase in your income, you've been left behind by about 20%, because it depends on the country where you are anyway. In UK, take for example, the interest rate has been around 4 or 5% for some years now. We're seeing it around 3 point something percent. So it means in 3 years, if you used to earn, let's say, £100,000, that same £100,000 is not going to be worth just 85. And when you add 3 years to that, it's going to be worth just barely 70,000. So you're like 30% behind. Okay, so and that is how people get, placed behind in the scale of things when it comes to economics. And even when you're working 9 to 5, I understand it is very difficult for a lot of people to now start to think about what kind of business can I really run? Because think about it, you wake up early in the morning from 9. Of course, you can't wake up 9 if you have 9 to 5. You wake up very, very early. You get ready for work. You're at work. You really, really put in all your effort, your time, your resources. You can't even think about anything else. And you come back home. All your energy for that day is drained, and you have to sleep, rest, play with the family, and start a new day, right? And it becomes a cycle. The next day you wake up, you keep doing the same thing. So it's pretty much difficult to come up with an idea and say, what type of business really can I start that I can do without being involved? That's the first criteria. That I can even start with the little resources I have with me, or that I can run and still allows me to to put in my very best at my place of work. So that from my experience talking to a lot of people, that is always the biggest problem. Everybody wants to start a business, right? Everybody wants to start a business, but not everybody will ever be able. In fact, if you're able to just open a website right now for any of the ideas that you might have, you're like way ahead than 90% of the people, because a lot of people will never, ever, ever even start to begin with. They would never really start an idea. Either it's going to be successful or it's going to fail. They just will not be able to find enough drive to start. So if you started something right now, kudos to you. But then let's go back to the basics of the topic. The reason why having an extra income is very important right now. The cost of inflation is there. The rate at which inflation is going up is there. The rate at which things are getting very expensive. Take, for example, the most important thing that we all spend, out of our salary, which is, housing, the cost of housing. The rate at which is going up is very massive. And the cost of home ownership seems to be getting out of hand, out of reach of people who are just doing 9 to 5. When you look at a chart about 10, 15 years ago, home prices seems to have been doubling or very close to doubling. So the question is your salary also moving at that same pace? Has it doubled over the past 20 years or 15 years? Perhaps that would be a very big no. So if you look at it from that perspective, it means, let's say you were earning £40,000 about 10 years ago. The question now is, are you now earning 100,000? Because if the cost of house is going up, that is not the only thing that is going up. The cost of living, food, transportation, every other thing is going up. The cost of maintaining yourself, maintaining your family, everything is going up. So if just the only thing we want to consider is the cost of housing going up, then that alone will challenge your salary. When you now add every other thing to it, which is now you have a family, now you have more responsibilities, you have other things to cater for, now you have a car, you want to pay all this and all that, then it becomes very clear that home ownership is going to really slip out of the reach of a lot of people. So much so that now we are seeing situations where people are even resigning to fate. I was talking to a colleague some days like that. She's based in London, and then she was telling me she has concluded in her mind that she can't really buy a house. And it's because of the rate at which things are going up. The cost of house is so high, it's so huge, that she seems to have resigned to fate that she can't buy a house. And the only thing she thinks can work is if she inherits her parents' property. Uh, and that's very stunning. It's very surprising because this is a person who, she's well educated. She has one of top top regarded skills or profession. And if she's resigning to this kind of fate, it tells you what the whole picture really looks like. Okay, so if you think about the fact that home ownership might really slip out of your hands, then you begin to understand why thinking about your flow of income is very important, is very, very key. It's very key. And if salary alone is not just able to give you that extra, it means it only keeps you at bay, and you have the desire to have a very good lifestyle, then you will agree with me that taking care of your lifestyle and also being able to save might be very difficult and tricky. So again, because of the cost of lifestyle, having an extra income or a side hustle becomes a good idea. Really. All right. So I think for those two core reasons, if you think about those two key reasons, you begin to come to terms with the fact that having an extra source of income actually makes sense. And on the flip side of it, if also you consider security, when you work in a job, it only takes maybe 1 or 2, 3 people to decide if you will earn the next month. Yes, and that can be very concerning, because the most secured thing is what you can control. All right. And even your place of work, they have a lot of things that are outside their control. If they get business coming into the business, that is one factor to consider. If that slips out of their hand, then they can't control it. Let's say the economy just went bad, or there's a change in management, or anything happens at the place of work. So the layer of risk of being an employee is very high. The layers of risk is very high, right? The hurdles of risk you have to scale is very high. And a lot of people tend to just overlook all this, even though they know that right at the back of their mind. But because you've been at the same place of work, you've seen other people, at the same place of work, the idea of a job tends to portray the sense of security. And in real life, in real essence, it's not really, really always the case. So for me, I feel like the layer of risk is very huge. All right, the layer of risk in that scenario is very huge. So, and that is why it is very important for you to start thinking about building, not only building your career, but also building your personal skills. So that is the first thing you always want to do. So if you now want to increase your source of income, I would say invest in one stock market, invest in one bond market. And that is not just the ordinary bond market or the ordinary stock market. The bond market or the stock market is you. Make sure you invest in you. And the first side of you want to invest in is your mentality. A lot of people have the wrong mentality and they want the right output. And that is a very conflicting idea, right? If your pattern of thought stands it stands contrary to where you're going to, then there's going to be a serious battle. You need to always find that space of time and resources to develop yourself. Because if you give a man a land filled with gold and you place him on that land, he might end up dying out of poverty. But you leave a man with skills and you put him on a desert, there's a very high chance he's going to come out of that desert being very rich. And that's because it will begin to ask questions. It'll begin to ask, what is the type of desert I'm in? Is there like gold? Is there like oil? Are there people moving through this space? Is there any form of market route or any potential opportunities? That is a man that is well equipped. There's a lot of investment in that kind of a mind. So I would say invest in yourself, because no matter where you find yourself today, the gap, or would I say the space for growth, is so massive that a lot of people tend to underestimate it. All right, they tend to underestimate the possibility or the possibilities of growth. Right, they tend to underestimate it. So invest critically into yourself. Um, Another reason is because if you are well equipped, you'll be smart enough and sharp enough to recognize opportunities. Right, a lot of opportunities do pass us, especially in this age of digital, everything being digital. Right, when you see opportunities very fast, it means you have a very sharp mind, a mind that is highly receptive. So I would say invest in yourself. That is the first thing, right? Go to conferences, buy books, change your environment, challenge your mindset, understand and know that things are possible. Nothing is actually out of reach. Anything you set your mind to do or to achieve can always be done. Why? Because you are created in God's image. A very clear example of the capacity of man was seen in Babylon, when men began to think that we can actually create, and that is born out of the desire to know God. They felt like they could actually create a building or a structure that would move from the face of their heart to heaven, and they were so united. They believed, their body, soul, and spirit. The level of faith they had was firstly internal, was also interconnected in terms of human to human relationship. They had one focus of one goal, which was to build that structure. So they believed in themselves, and they also believed themselves. So they were moving so fast that God knew that they will achieve it. And that is because God created us in his own image. You see, a man will not believe another person is able to do something if they think they cannot do it. So God knew they can achieve it because he knows that he created them in his own image. And the image of God, in his image, there is nothing called impossibility. So he knew they will achieve it. No questions about that. Like no doubt at all. He knew they were going to get the goal. So the only way he could stop them was to make them work against themselves. And they began to work against themselves, really. And we saw the effect of that, which is the fact that they were unable to achieve that goal, right? They were unable to achieve that goal. So when you believe in yourself, right, you're able to achieve anything. Okay, so now the key of the matter is have a clear vision, have a clear goal. You have the capacity as a human being, as a child of God, to achieve any goal you set your hands on. I mean, anything and everything is possible. The world around us has proven it to us. We see aeroplanes flying in the sky. Ideally, that is impossible because of the force of gravity. All right, we see huge ships on the sea. Ideally, that should be impossible, but we understand, the power of floating and in Archimedes' principle. All these were made possible. It's a lot of things that technology has shown us that if a man is focused enough, is able to create things out of unreal things, is able to create a reality out of unreality, so to say, is able to make things happen even when it seems as if nothing will happen. All right, so that is how powerful we are as humans. And that is the kind of capacity that God has placed in us, that God has placed in you. God created you to be a solution provider. He created you to be able to look at zero and turn it into a million. He's created you to be able to achieve anything you've set your mind to achieve. So the biggest investment, again, I would say, is in yourself. Always believe in yourself. Always invest in yourself. Know that when you invest in yourself, the ROI, the return on investment, is infinite, meaning you would then have the capacity to turn anything into anything. Right? Anything into anything. We've seen nations of the world where they have huge natural resources and they're unable to tap it to the fullest of their own benefits. And we've seen people from other parts of the world coming into such countries and exploring the natural resources. Now, there is no difference between them in terms of being human, but the difference is the other people coming into the places where there are natural resources. They have the technology, they have the technical know-how, they have the human resources to be able to turn those natural resources into wealth. So now, what is the difference? The difference is not is not at the level of Homo sapiens. It's not at the level of humans. The difference is at the level of the growth capacity of those humans. Some human beings came in with technology, with tools, with a sophisticated mindset. They get things done. Now, the people who have those resources within their domain not being able to develop themselves to that level, they get nothing done. And those natural resources are unable to serve them as a source of wealth. All right. So it tells us really that anything is possible. Anything is possible and everything is possible. And so that is what I'm going to be pushing to you today. If you're looking at earning, having an extra source of income, one key thing you should do is invest in yourself. All right. All right. That cannot be overemphasized. Invest in yourself, because you are the one that can return the highest level of return on investment. Okay. Invest in yourself. Believe in yourself. Put yourself through systems and processes that helps you to achieve your goal. And I will tell you what, anything is possible and everything is possible.